And when I think about reimagining possibilities, everything with my training has been to amplify the voices of those who do not get amplified. So tonight I want to talk about my vision for what contribution can be in this world. So I want you to reflect on this number, 69%. 69% is the percentage of the United States gross domestic product that's in personal consumption. Now, I don't expect a ton of people to be versed in economics, but let's think of it this way. Whenever a country calculates its GDP, it looks at personal consumption, it looks at investment, it looks at government spending, and looks at net exports. So what this basically means is, of the total domestic product of the United States, almost 70% of that is what you and I buy. So obviously, this type of personal consumption drives the United States. It's the engine of the United States. And that 69% number is the highest ever recorded. To give you a point of comparison, the European Union, that number is 52%. So here in America, we like to buy stuff, right? You can say, yeah, we like to buy stuff, right? and we understand that, we live in a world where it's good to consume. We like the things that we like. We sit down and we watch Netflix and we think, wow, that's a really nice thing right there. I'm going to go ahead on Amazon, do one-click shopping, buy it, comes to my house the next day, and it's just a beautiful way to live, obviously. And the reason why we do this type of thing is because it feels good, right? It feels good to get something new and to procure something. Neuroscientists say that it leads to a flooding of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that basically makes chocolate taste so darn good and makes you love that Earth, Wind, and Fire song. You know which one I'm talking about. You know I'm talking about September. And all of that is based on this dopamine rush that comes into our minds. And it gives us that little buzz in such a way that, if you're my wife, you go out and do some shopping and she calls that therapy. And yet it's a lot more expensive than a therapist. But I understand it because I understand this. And also, completely outside of brain chemistry, consumption is identity. In a 2013 Psychology Today article, it linked consumption with identity. So imagine like little Dan. I know it's hard to think about. Imagine little Dan. And I'm watching television, and it's the first time I see Michael Jordan. And I see Nikes. And I said to myself, I need to get those. Went to Mom, said, Mom, can I get these Nikes? She said, why? It's like, well, they make you fly. She's like, we need to find better schools for you, because that's not exactly what they do. And they cost over $100. But in doing that, I knew the identity that I wanted to have. I wanted to fly. I wanted to be like that. And the way I would get to be like that is through consumption. So consumption is basically what drives most of our lives. And it's so important to us. And we know that throughout history, this is not a new thing. We have always dealt with consumption, whether that's food, whether that's water, whether that's consuming products for shelter. But the one thing that we have to keep in mind nowadays is, what does consumption look like? Is it necessities now, or is consumption just the default that we have? Is it about surviving, or is it about lifestyle? When we talk about reimagining possibilities, here's the possibility I reimagine. I reimagine a world where every single time, if I choose to, I swipe my credit card, I give to something else. My idea that changes everything is to have a more real link between consumption and contribution. Now, someone might say, Dan, listen, I have the Nikes, not as good as giving to the Salvation Army. But hear me out here, because what I'm going to talk about is how neuroscience tells us how it's possible. So, for example, when we think about consumption, think about breathing. Inhaling is like consuming something, right? We can't inhale forever. When we blow out, that's like contribution. Now, if we just inhale forever, what happens? We suffocate. It's impossible. So balance comes with both the inhale and the exhale that happens. And to have a balanced life, my belief is that we have to have some level of contribution as well as that level of consumption. And so what happens is with our brains, it's actually really interesting. When we make contribution, it has a positive impact on our mind. Contribution not only sends out dopamine, but also oxytocin, which then gives us that warm feeling whenever we give to somebody. In fact, in a 2006 Psychology Today article, they discussed the fact that once we give, we have very similar mental processing and feelings as when we go shopping. So think of it this way. Whenever we take in something like food, whenever we consume it, it's a hedonic activity. We feel like a real jolt there, especially if we have like a nice donut with our coffee in the morning or something like that. But that's always very short term. However, contribution gives us a much longer feeling of happiness because of the deep value that we ascribe to what we're doing. And this is not new, folks. Throughout history, societies have shown that in order to thrive and in order to exist, tribes had to get together, not hoard what they had, but to share what they had. So we have a long history throughout all of humanity with this concept that sharing and giving is what eventually leads to an organized and successful society. It's a lot like eating, right? If you're eating, you're consuming something, and you feel good in the moment. If you're working out, which some of us need to do more of that, but if you're working out, even though it's hard at first, think about how you feel once you leave the gym. You feel as though you've accomplished something. You're sweaty, you're sore, but you feel that feeling in your head that, hey, this was worth it to me. And I want you to think about contribution like that. That even though it might be hard to start with, it's always worth it in the end, especially, much like working out, if it's consistent. So here's the big question. I work for a nonprofit. I work for an organization. How do I go about the process of giving that gentle nudge to make sure that people view contribution similarly to viewing consumption? Now, I got a PhD from Temple University. I'm a neurodiverse individual, so it took me 6 years, 10 months, and 6 days. I only know that because my university kicks you out at 7 years. So I had the egg timer going, I had an hourglass, I had an abacus, like whatever I was going to do, I need to get done. And my dissertation research was in impulse online giving to nonprofits. And what happened was, based on the work of a researcher named Prensky, he outlined two groups of people: digital natives, people who started their first grade years with the internet, so you can think millennials and younger, and digital immigrants, which is what I am, who did not start this secondary education with the internet. And we had to do strange things that my children don't have to do, like read books. And so what he found with his research was these are very different groups. So when I did my dissertation work, I found two very interesting things with impulse online giving. The first thing is digital immigrants and digital natives have different definitions of what altruism is. For digital immigrants, altruism was offline and local. So for example, to feel altruistic, I had to go with my parents to the Sunday breakfast mission and serve food to the folks. I was belly to belly, face to face with them. For digital natives, they consider altruism online and global. They want to have the opportunity to hit a button and save the world. So when Wyclef Jean said, oh my God, there's a typhoon in Haiti, all kinds of kids went on there and gave him mad money to deal with that. But they were not at the Sunday breakfast mission. The other thing that was interesting in my research was this concept that for digital immigrants, we are more likely to give impulsively based on mission. So if I know someone with cancer, I give to the American Cancer Society. Seems to make sense. Digital natives were more likely to give based on affiliation. So if a celebrity they respected said, give to this, or if a lot of their friends were doing it, they'd give to it. Back home where I'm from, a very popular event is the MS Bike to the Bay. And a large number of people there do not know what MS stands for and cannot spell multiple sclerosis. But they just want to be part of a group that's participating in something. So whenever we are a nonprofit, whenever we're working as an organization that's looking to get this type of funding, we have to keep in mind that we have to market to both digital natives and digital immigrants. And there are a couple of basic ways that we're able to do that. The first thing that we have to do, especially for digital natives, is we have to show them the end game before they donate. We want to show the smiling faces of those people whose lives are changed. We want to tell them what their future looks like. We want to make sure that they understand not what's happening in the present, but how their impact will happen globally based on a small donation. And what happens with that is we can do very, very small things. So one of the small things that we can do, I call the 120-second exhale. So we talked about inhaling and exhaling. So as I inhale a consumptive behavior, I set a watch on my phone, I set a timer on my phone for 120 seconds, and in that 120 seconds, I need to do a giving behavior. Usually for me, that's calling my mom, and I still can't call her enough, seemingly. But calling my mom, paying for coffee for a friend, giving to a nonprofit, tipping the barista that has my coffee. And the interesting thing about that is, why 120 seconds? Well, what happens there is the brain is incredible, because even though this is a very small act, if I have this consumptive behavior and I pair it with a contributing behavior, my brain, within those 120 seconds, my brain will link these two activities together and give me some level of a script that says, I consume, therefore I give. In doing that, neuroscientists would tell us that by making sure that I have this contributory behavior closed, by the time that 120-second window is open, it fuses those two activities together. So I get the dopamine rush from giving to somebody. Now the contributory behavior and the consumptive behavior are now linked in my mind. And so now, over time, as I do that contributory behavior, because it's linked in my mind, I get that same dopamine rush from doing that part. Also, a really basic thing that we can do is just have very small contributory behaviors every single day. Give $1 to a nonprofit. Help feed a dog on the street. Do something else with your family. The brain loves to be shaken up. Not physically, that's CTE. The brain loves to be shaken up mentally. And so by continually surprising your brain with these different contributory behaviors, it gives you the same level of dopamine rush as some of the other things that you're doing. And then finally, affiliation. Look for opportunities, especially with digital natives, to put them in groups to give and to serve. And the first group that you can always start with is your family. One of the major things I had to get used to was how my children consider giving compared to how I consider giving. So now we work together. We give sometimes in my way, where we go and volunteer together, and then we give in their ways, where they find people that they relate to who want to give to their charities, and then we do that online. We've built this partnership of giving, and they love that just as much as the other, mainly because they're giving with dad's money. But we start somewhere. So here's the major piece here. You don't have to give $1 million to have an impact. What we want to do is to have contributory behavior being as normal and as common as buying lunch for yourself. Once you get into this habit of giving consistently, even small amounts of money, that greatly impacts our society. So next time the world that I want reimagined, as soon as I have the opportunity to hit buy on my phone, I automatically want to hit give. These things that feed us from a consumption perspective, if we give back, it feeds our entire society. So consumption may fill our shelves, but contribution fills our lives. Thank you so much.